Oh, look at that. The live's up there already. Good morning. It's Thursday, January 30th here at the House Transportation. And we're starting off, Lee, talking a lot about paving and highways. And usually, I guess we had Rob White was listed on the agenda first, but I think Matt is going to be starting us off. So I guess if you want to take it away and introduce yourself for the record and start leading us along this morning.
Sure.
We start our second of many jumps into the budget for 2025, 26. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for having me. For the record, my name is Matt Pagachik, and I am the program manager for the Highway Safety and Design section, which oversees three programs that we'll chat about today, which are the roadway program, traffic and safety, and the paving program. Hopefully share this without any technical difficulties. All right, perfect. So we'll jump right in. The first program that we're going to talk about today is the roadway program. This will be 5D in your white book. And we'll talk a little bit about the scopes of work that we do before jumping into the hard numbers here. So I throw this up on, just want to make sure that my screen's not covering it because that's covering here. I throw this up on the screen. It's the V-Trans mission. And just to throw out that the roadway group is, it's really tasked with creating plan specifications and estimates for construction projects on a very wide range of scopes of projects. And this means that we're contributing to safety, mobility, and improving or maintaining asset condition on our network, which directly ties into V-Trans's mission. The design group that's charged with the roadway program is the roadway design group, which is comprised of 10 team members. We have project managers, engineers, and technicians in that group. And in addition to that main responsibility of producing plan specifications and estimates, there's also a look to make sure that we're ensuring fiscal responsibility, delivering projects on time. We have to have quality plan sets, obviously, to reduce any type of impact that may happen out in construction, make sure that we're using sound engineering principles to produce those plan sets. And then the group is the main point of contact through the design phase. So we do have a customer service facing side. We're very easily accessible through V-Transparency. All of our contact information is on there during the design phase. We'll talk a little bit about the different scopes that fall into the roadway program, very high level, just to chat about it. First is the roadway reconstruction. So these are your full depth reconstructions. These are the big projects, the big digs type of work. So you can see a couple of different pieces of the puzzle that usually go into these types of projects. In reality, these are replacing the sub base of a roadway with something that's engineered, something that has a lot of structure, producing a new HMA or hot mix pavement that's engineered to take on all the traffic. That, of course, gets into utilities oftentimes, typically into the drainage or culvert type work. A good example of this is an upcoming project. This is the Pittsburgh-Brandon project, so US 7 reconstruction. You may have heard about it in the past. This is going to be a removal of the existing roadway and a replacement with a new roadway in the same general area. We'll be fixing geometries. It will be all brand new materials from the subbase up. So we designed to handle all the traffic there. It will be wider to meet the National Highway typical sections. Another scope of work are the culverts. This is a big element within the roadway program. That can be anywhere from small culvert replacements or repairs, linings. That's what you would see on the left side of this image, where we're ramming a pipe through an existing culvert area to help support it, to full-blown replacements with something that is hydrologically adequate. An example of this of the culvert program is this is the Dow Pond Dam project, which is Middlebury on 116. Basically, there was a project that was listed there to replace a couple of culverts that went under Route 116. Through one of the flood events, this became more of an emergent need than the original typical capital project. So we went in, we had a design plan that was 99% ready, and we were able to mold that to replace the culvert and get the road back open, get 116 back open. So that's what you can see on the right-hand side of the picture is the new box concrete that was put in. Just a couple of final images on the inlet side, so on the pond side, and then on the right is the outlet side of that new concrete box. And finally, for some reviews of the projects, another task of the roadway group is the slope and ledge stabilization project. So this can be anywhere from the massive ledge cuts that you see on the interstate to some armoring of existing stream banks or that interface between the stream and the road to make sure that the road stays where it is, make sure the river stays where it is. And then also the more emergent needs where we've had some type of failure of a slope, which you can see off to the right here. Sample project of this, and hopefully it kind of shows the perspective of this, but there's the Fairleigh project. It's a rock cut on the interstate next to Interstate 91. This is a massive project where the slope is in a unstable manner currently. So we're working to go out, do some scaling, remove some of that loose rock, and then put something back in that's stable. I do want to point out, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor up there or not, but the picture all the way to the left, if you see the little Matchbox car looking things on the roadway, those are full-size cars. So that just tries to give a scale of the size of this project. It is very, very tall, very, very large. And we're planning on going out to construction with that this summer. All right, on to the numbers. So for fiscal 26, there is an appropriation of 67.66 million, which is a slight increase compared to last year, about $600,000. This funding will support 3 different phases of project development and construction. Kind of let the cat out of the bag on that one. So there's the preliminary engineering phase, which is the actual design of the project, the contracting, the estimating. There's the right-of-way phase, which we are purchasing right-of-way or getting easements to be able to construct the project. And of course, the movement of the dirt being the construction phase. The funding is showing construction funds for 47 projects in fiscal 26, and will also support the design and right-of-way phases of an additional 47 projects. In total, ignoring the fiscal 26 view of the program, there are 135 projects within the roadway program. That boils down to 37 different standard roadway or intersection improvement type projects. So meaning that whether it's a full reconstruction of a roadway or a segment of roadway, down to smaller intersection improvements. 5 of that 37 are showing construction funding in fiscal year 26. There are also 35 small culvert rehab or replacement projects, 14 of which will show funding for construction in 26. And there are 40 emergency repair projects, 20 of which have construction funding in 26. And then finally, I did include a line. There are 8 what I'm labeling as miscellaneous projects. The roadway group has a few projects that are stormwater retrofits or don't quite fit the exact mold of one of the other options. So that's what I'm meaning by other. So we have 5 of those that have funding shown in fiscal year 2026. Moving along to the 10G reports. So the first are new projects that were added to the program since 25. Rather than read off the entire list, I'll just make a couple of notes. You'll see that the vast majority of these they fall within the roadway program. They are labeled as ER and then some federalized name after that. These are projects that were programmed after flooding events. They are there as permanent repairs in response to some flooding event. The ER program takes them to a different subset of funding, but they do show up within the roadway program, which is why they're showing up on this list. The remainder of these projects are mainly dealing with asset condition. So something has deteriorated to a point where we've programmed a project to either repair or replace that asset to make sure that it stays in good shape or is repaired up to new standard, keeps the roadway in the shape that it needs to be.
What's the biggest ticket item? Is it Fairleigh at 13.1?
That's new.
The biggest new ticket item, I would have to go back to double check. I am sure that that is up at one of the top.
I understand that, so a lot of the new ones, or most of them, it's emergency repair, or flood related, that's in the book. And or the condition has gotten so bad that we had to put it in. That right?
Yes.
So our regular sort of plan of without flood back 2-3 years ago, that stuff's had to be pushed a fair amount. Then what we would have otherwise be doing if it weren't for emergency and deteriorated condition, what we wanted to do is gets pushed more, and what we're doing is what we have to do in effect, as opposed to, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, sure.
You understand where I'm headed with my
Yep.
question?
Yep.
We're talking about what we can and can't get done on our own infrastructure and what's emergency and what's,
Yeah, for the
how far
record,
behind is this gonna put us?
for the record, Rob White, Project Delivery Bureau Director. It's not totally true that we're pushing projects because of these ER projects. The ER projects get additional funds from the federal government. So the only reason that a project might get pushed because of ER work is just because of the resources that we might need, like people. But generally, it doesn't have an impact on the projects and where they sit and what year to get constructed.
We're not having a major slowdown in keeping up with our overall infrastructure plan because of the floods. It would be every bit as much as our manpower, our ability to deliver with the huge increase in cost, but also with lack of employment and whatnot, as opposed to what we've had to adjust and deal with.
Correct, it's not a financial issue at all.
Thank you. Representative Cox?
Yes, thanks. On that same topic, I guess, so we look at these ER projects, that's getting FEMA money to support it. Is there enough there, and what's the match? It's a very small match or no match?
So this money would be federal highway money, not necessarily
Okay.
FEMA money.
Okay,
And the match it depends. Some of the work that's done in the first 270 days after that emergency is 100% federally eligible. And then anything after that, which is a lot of what you see here with these permanent projects, is normally in the range of an 80-20 type of scenario.
so it's a similar to other projects, might be 80-20. And I think I've asked this question before, but I just want to ensure, all of this replacement of what's there, you know, the hydraulic, loading or it's being looked at and with the newer numbers, I guess, and being sized appropriately.
Yeah, so when a culvert project takes place on the, I don't know if I can pick one out, but I'll go back to the Dow Pond Dam. So in this particular example, the culverts that were there were undersized, and there was a hydraulic study to analyze how large of a culvert needed to be put in place. That included some aquatic organism passage into the number. So when we're looking at a culvert and looking at that particular asset and doing a full-blown replacement in that magnitude, there is a hydraulic study that does go into place. There are a few on the list that are, for example, there's on the bottom left column, there's Orwell Addison STP Culv Pren 153. That is more of the replacing kind. And the intent of that project and the intent of many of these projects is to replace culvert assets ahead of a paving project coming through. So where Orwell Addison, Middlesex, Worcester, there's a few other examples, Essex Town, Fairfax, these are stretched out over multiple towns. And that's a pretty good indication that these are asset replacements generally in kind to take care of something that's aged or has deteriorated before we get there and we do a paving project over top of it and hopefully avoid that pavement cut eventually.
Now, were you directly involved in that Dow Pond?
I was not.
Okay. Got a couple questions about that one. We handled some of it.
I can get you in contact with the person.
It's pretty general, but yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I have a question. So I know that there are several projects in Brattleboro that are in the paving budget. And I'm now understanding they're listed here with $0. I mean, is there some reason why they get listed in paving and roadway, that it's, I think it's a paving project, but I'm just want to understand why they're listed, because I think it's pretty much the same projects that are in the paving are listed here with $0.
So I would have to look at the exact project name or in that federal number at the end of it.
Yeah.
There are some samples where there may be a paving project that is overlapping limits of what is a long reconstruction type project.
Plan for the future.
Plan for the future,
Okay,
yes.
all
Yeah.
right, that makes sense.
So
Okay.
there's a potential that that's taking place. Typically you don't see the exact same project showing up in two different programs. I can't think of any
Well, there
times
was no
that.
money, so that's like, seemed to me like that makes sense, what you're saying.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but I'm happy to look at it closer afterwards if need be.
Just curious.
Sure, yeah. All right, I'm going to move along. So this is the first of the expanded projects cut at the 10G reports. So these are projects that have increased since last year by either $5 million or more or 75% increase. We have a few of them that show up on here. They, generally speaking, there are a couple that it is a discrepancy between the initial estimate, which is very undefined what the project scope is going to be. Doesn't really take into account all of the parameters of say, a culvert replacement in the case of the Facein project. Doesn't necessarily take into account the right of way that may be needed, how large the box may be, the actual dirt work. It's really just a best shot at what we have for historic data to say relatively close, this size of a box is going to cost us somewhere in this nature. So that's the case of the Facein project. Many of these are also scope refinement or plan refinement through the process. Hubbardton was a ledge project. So as it went through it went through more plan refinement, went through more of the permitting, more of the right of way. They did modify the scope slightly and change it from a rockfall catchment fence to a soil nailed wall or a pinned wire mesh on the rock ledge. So there's a little bit of plan refinement built into that one. The Morristown project is, again, it's an initial estimate. So our best guess at the time of saying there's a problem here, we need to do something with it, to what is a more refined estimate. The Pittsford Brandon project, which we had talked about a little bit earlier, is, again, it's more of a moving from or updating the estimate from what was the current version at the time, trying to take into account the current bidding trends, and also, involvement with more resources and permitting in that project. I think that covers the list on this.
So we shouldn't assume that it's just the fact that the cost of every project's gone up with the scope of the project changes as well. It's both. It's the cost of goods and material and actual construction work, but it's also as projects, you learn more about the project, the scope of the overall of the project changes as well.
Yeah, and
Or you're saying it's definitely more than just the cost of the items.
it's a little bit of both. So I just from my world, I'm thinking of scope. So I would call it the scope is being defined a little bit better. So in the example of the Facein Culv project for, it's just top of the list. That one we know the scope is to replace an existing culvert. What we don't necessarily know is what the size of the culvert will be when it's initially programmed. We know that we have to do something with this particular culvert. We don't know what we're doing yet. So the scope is really being dialed in or defined or refined as you go through the process, and that can increase costs. Sometimes we hit it right on the head and we get, the perfect initial estimate, and we say, generally speaking, within the bounds of what that estimate is, but it is really a definition as you work through the process and work through the design.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, moving along to the second of the expansion 10G reports. This is a comparison of the preliminary plans estimate versus the current estimate, and that would be the projects that are triggered on this list are an increase of $10 million or more, or 100% from the preliminary plan estimate to now. There are a couple of projects on here that I want to kind of lump together in the discussion. That's the Burlington MEGC M5000 Pren 1 project and the Essex Junction SDP 5300 Pren 13. So commonly known as the Champlain Parkway in Burlington and the Crescent Connector in Essex. These are, substantial increases from the preliminary plan phase or the preliminary plan estimate. Part of what's going on here is the age of the estimate. So the record of the preliminary plan estimate in Burlington was 2016. For Essex Junction, the record was 2014. Since then, the model of construction has been putting separate contracts out and building these in phases. And that's kind of built into why these have increased from that preliminary plan estimate to where they're at today. The Crescent Connector, for example, that was built in a couple of different phases. So there was a railroad crossing phase of that project. And then there was also the building of the roadway and installing new signals. Morristown was on the last list. And again, it's more plan refinement through, I think that was an ER project. So that's more plan refinement. That's getting to the low bid and seeing the actual cost of construction. Pittsford Brandon is, again, it's in that more plan refinement. It's taking into account the estimate time, which was 2014, and realizing that the current estimate is in 2025 dollars. So there's a difference there. And Williston falls within that similar type process. It's plan refinement. The project was bid, so we saw the actual construction cost. I did check in on that one. I think we were within 20% on the estimate at that time. So many of these are due to timing. The one anomaly on this list is due to the report generation. So the Essex NH Swiffer projects or for 4 or SWFR Pren 4, that one had a preliminary plans estimate that came in at $1. It was a mistake by either the program or when the project manager went in to update it. So it does show up on this list. In reality, it shouldn't be on this list. The preliminary plans estimate was $558,000 and the current estimate is $596,000. So just a report generation thing, but worth pointing out. Sure.
Like on that Morristown one, you get an initial bid there. If that project is timely and completed immediately, they do not make a higher bid, right? But if it's delayed, you're subject to rising costs and stuff like this? Or what are other variables there? Because I see that one doesn't say that you had to go in and switch from your preliminary plan. So if it's done in timely fashion, does the initial bid hold, or you're still subject to other factors?
So the initial, if I understand, and please correct me if I'm misunderstanding your question. The bid phase doesn't happen until you're at a contract plan phase. So once we have a contract in hand, those, save for some parameters of our spec book, those bids hold for the construction of the project. We're setting completion dates with those such that nothing would have to be modified based on timing. Now, if there was some storm event and maybe there's a provision in the spec book, I'm not aware of any. But once we have a bid in hand from a potential contractor, those prices hold true.
Okay.
So it wouldn't necessarily be a modification. So these are unit price bids. So when we put a contract out, we have a list of items that are bid on. We have an estimated quantity of those items. And then contractors are looking to place a unit price on each of those. And those become the contract prices for the actual work taking place.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wondered if there was other variables in changing that initial bid, but it sounds like that holds unless you got to make changes to the final project.
Correct.
Okay. Yep. Thanks.
And I would say there are clauses in there too for oil and fuel, there are escalation clauses.
Okay.
It's not like a lot price, it can fluctuate.
All right, moving to the fourth of the 10G reports. These are the projects that are closed or not showing funding in 26, and they were funded in 25. As it says on the top, these projects are generally complete or will be complete within the fiscal year. So that's why they're not showing funding in 26. The only one that stands out as a difference to that is the Burlington Raise Pren 5 project. It says rebuild 4 streets. This is a project that the funding was transitioned from that project EA to a different one. It's the same, I believe it's the same area. It's the Burlington CDS CD Bren 3 or 23. I apologize. I remembered that number this morning and forgot it now. But basically the raise, it was a raise grant that was the funding was transitioned over into another EA that was working on that project. So that's the only anomaly in this list. The rest of them, the projects are completed and none of them were canceled. All right, moving along. So the next section that we're going to take a look at is the traffic and safety program, which is the traffic design unit. This will be tab 5E in your white book. Just throwing up a picture of a project that we will talk a little bit more about. This is the Hartford NHG Signal Pren 60 project, which was completed last summer. Not a lot of difference here in the mission and what traffic design is tasked with. Again, they're creating plan specs and estimates to build these projects, and they're increasing or ensuring safety, mobility, and keeping assets in good condition or replacing them with something brand new so that they stand the test of time. Traffic design group working primarily within the traffic and safety program is comprised of 9 team members, which are project managers and engineers. And very similarly to the roadway design group, they're also responsible for fiscal responsibility, making sure that projects stay on track, on time. They're ensuring quality plan sets are being produced. And just like in the roadway program, they are the first point of contact throughout the design process. Their names are also listed on V-Transparency on the map view, so their contact information is out there for the public if there's any questions on any of the projects that are out there. As I noted, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the scopes of work. So within the traffic group, much of the work is focused on intersections, and that can be either changing the type of intersection control or potentially modernizing what's there. In the case of the Hartford project, which is shown on your screen, there were 2 different types of work that took place. The bottom left picture is near the Hartford High School. There's 2 signal systems there. They had existing mast arms. They had a decent cabinet. But the hardware had aged. So some of the work that traffic design does is modernization of existing signal systems. And in this case, that's what they did. They went in and replaced controller cabinets, put in new detection that's current standard, put in new signal heads to add to some of the conspicuity of the intersection. The top right image is of US 5 and North Main Street, also in Hartford. At this location, it's really that next step up for the traffic design asset replacements. This was a full-blown intersection rebuild to new signal infrastructure. Showing a little bit of a difference in what was out there. This is back at that North Main Street intersection. So on the left, you can see the signals are really hard to see as you're coming down US 5. This was one of the older signal systems in the state. I don't know that it was the oldest, but it was definitely on the top of that list. To the right is the new signal infrastructure, which, as you can see, it puts the signal heads out across the road. They're very conspicuous as you come into that intersection. You know what's going on. And that's really what the intent of that project was. Not only replace that aging infrastructure, but increase the safety. Because this project was done as a composite with a paving project, we also had the ability to make some changes to the lanes and increase some of the bike and ped infrastructure as you go across the road. To that point, we were able to install a bicycle actuated crossing signal at this location. So much like what you would have with a pedestrian push button, or if you come to a signal, you push the button, you wait for the walk symbol. This is kind of the in-between of a vehicle signal and a pedestrian signal. So bicyclists would come up to this intersection, press the button on the edge of the road, which you can see on the left-hand picture here, and they would wait to get a bicycle signal. Probably a little bit hard to see, but the signal face on this on the picture on the right is actually a symbol of a bicycle. So much like you would get a walk symbol and then a countdown timer, in this case, you have a push button, you wait for a green bicycle light to show up, and then you would get your time to cross the road within the bicycle lane. I'm going to jump because I realized that I put these out of line. So The furthest up on the traffic and safety or the traffic design type projects is really full-blown rebuilds of intersections. This is one example of some of the more complex work that group does, being a full-blown rebuild to a different type of intersection control. This project is down in Bennington. We lovingly refer to it as the peanut roundabout, given the shape, kind of looks like a peanut. So this is taking the geometry of the 5 roads that are coming into the intersection and allowing vehicles to transition through. It's got the right radii so that trucks can get through. And it was advertised this past summer. We'll start building the project this coming spring, and construction plans to extend through 2026.
Quick question while we're on Bennington roundabouts. Glad to see this is finally moving forward and contract's been awarded and we're all good to go. There was scoping on Kosher Drive and Route 7 in Bennington for potential 2 or 3 more roundabouts. And there was funding in there last year for scoping, but I don't see it in this year's budget. Was that taken out?
I am not aware of that one. I would have to look back and.
There was 3 spots right on Route 7 heading out of town, and then there was one by Aldi's, if you know the location, and then one further down, but there's 3 spots that had scoping money. Just curious of where that is, but you can get back.
Sure. Yep. All right, so jumping back up here, getting into the data. So again, this is on tab 5E. This is the traffic and safety program. So the fiscal 26 appropriation is $45.83 million, which is a decrease of 4.8 million compared to last year. And very much like the roadway program, the funding will go towards the design activities or the preliminary engineering, the acquisition of property or easements being the right-of-way phase, and then the actual movement of dirt being the construction phase. What this translates into in terms of projects is the funding will help with the construction of 14 projects. So there's funding shown in fiscal 26 for 14 different projects. And then it's also continuing the design and right-of-way efforts for an additional 37 projects. As a comparison to the total program, we have 61 total projects in traffic and safety spread out across multiple fiscal years. The breakdown shows below, there are 48 of those intersection type improvement projects. That's a big catch-all for the different scopes that I talked about previously, which can go from signal hardware upgrades up to the large and complex rebuilds of the intersection, like your peanut roundabout, like the DDI in Colchester. 7 of those 48 are showing construction funding in fiscal year 26. We also show 9 sign replacement projects. This is at the asset level, replacement of signs that have aged out. 3 of those have construction funding in fiscal 26. And then we have annual marking projects or annual mark projects. There are 4 of those that are in the program currently, and all 4 of those will show 2026 funding. On to the 10G reports. The first are new projects added to the program after fiscal 25. The project that showed up here is a no-build project. It's the crash reporting HWCR PREM 333, which is the crash reporting system tool, as well as consultant support, program maintenance. So this is not a project that will be built. I believe that it's a project looking to safety across the network, and then potentially identifying other projects that would be built.
Yeah, thanks. I was gonna ask a question about these intersection improvements and how you prioritize them, and where, some of them are, it sounds like the infrastructure, the signaling stuff's so old, it needs to be upgraded. And then you look at the intersection. But some of these must be based on crash data, safety data. And I'm curious, is that true? How is that data put together? Can you see a list of crash data associated with intersections on state roads? And, is there like a heat map or something that shows you those? And then with the assumption that based on that data, would also feed into the priority of these projects. So now I'm not intersections on state roads, and is there like a heat map or something that shows you those and then.
All right.
Muted.
Boy, that
Mark the
voice
voice here.
sounds funny.
Mark
huh?
the-
When you hear your own voice, you hear it all the time.
Yeah, I know.
So that was a long question, sorry, but.
Sure, again, please correct me if I miss any of it. I do know that there is a crash reporting tool that's on our V-Transparency website. I believe that somebody's talking about that at some point, coming in to talk about the website. Love it. I talk about it all the time. I love the website. But there is a tool on there where you can dial into roadways, towns, the type of crash, the number of crashes. You can see it in a map view, you can see it in a table view. So I'm not familiar enough with that tool to say it will boil down to intersection locations, or if it will just give you a stretch of road and then you kind of look at the map to dial in on where those crashes are taking place. So to that effect, you could potentially look to translate between what crashes are happening at which intersections and if there's a project there. Many of and this is not all, but many of the signal projects or the SGNL brand number projects are asset replacements or asset condition based. Some of them have a crash history and we will be improving the safety at the intersection through whether it's new signal heads with the retroreflected backplates to add to the conspicuousness of the intersection or of the signals. Many intersections, of course, have crashes associated with them, and we're always looking to improve the safety at those. There are other projects which are safety projects that are not necessarily programmed because the condition of the intersection infrastructure is old or in poor shape. They're there because they are a true safety project. I don't think that we have a specific list of which goes which way, other than HSIP, maybe.
Yeah, so the direct answer to your question is yes, we're using that crash data, but to Matt's point is some of our projects are specifically for infrastructure improvement, and we will look at crash data in that area to see if there's something that might need to get fixed, but we specifically have safety projects too that look at high crash locations to try to fix the issue. So we are using it to prioritize those types.
So I'm interested in that, and I got a particular intersection I'm curious about, but whether we're appropriately using that data, whether it's the right data, and is that data changing over time? It's a particular intersection, because of additional traffic maybe, or lack of enforcement, becoming more and more over time dangerous. And is it coming up and saying, hey, look, this intersection, part of the reason it's dangerous is the design allows speeding or it's just a poor design for visibility. So, I'm very curious on learning more about that.
Representative Wow.
Yeah, just to follow up on what Representative Pouch was saying, I think this is in an era of very limited resources, there could be an opportunity to align some of the prioritization with the Regional Planning Commission mapping of designated areas. With, we have the Vermont state standards that are underway, so we could kind of marry all of this. And, these are places where we're hoping to focus new housing. And it seems like if that is the future land use intention, making sure that these places have intersections that are can accommodate expected pedestrians and cyclists seems like good, wise use of limited resources to me. And it could also help kind of focus and prioritize, again, limited funding.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions and input. Up next are the expanded projects within the 10G report. So the first are comparison to last fiscal year to this one. And this is an increase of $5 million or more, or 75% or more. So I think that's the peanut roundabout at the top. So the first one on the,
Last year would have saved some money. Nobody listened to me.
Lesson learned.
Yeah, see?
so you took the wind out of my sails on the response to this one. So,
Yeah.
some of this increase is definitely due to plan refinement, making sure that we have the dialed in scope ahead of the advertisement. And it's also reflective of current bidding trends and does show, against the low bid unit cost there. Up next is the Bennington Signal Print 63 project, which it's a host of signals along 7A and 67A. This is much like the Peanut Roundabout. It's a consistent scope. It's just plan refinement and then reflective of current bidding trends that has increased those costs. Bradford St. J is a signal infrastructure upgrade. The new estimated cost. So this falls into when we talked about the roadway program, where there was an initial estimate that was at the time of programming with a very open scope. We knew that we had to do something with the infrastructure that's out there. In the case of Bradford St. J, we knew that we had signals to replace. At the initial programming of the project, there was the use of $1 million for that project. And then as we define that scope better through the plan development process, that's where the cost increases come in. Up next is the Colchester DDI, which is the NH 5600 Print 14. This is contract 2. So this is the main amount of work, or the bulk of the work. This is a direct increase in cost due to bidding trends. It's refining of our unit prices to match what we've been seeing for bidding history that's come in recent years.
Are you
And
getting multiple, like, do your bids, are they getting like one or two, are they healthy competitive bids or on these projects? Just curious.
yeah, generally speaking, we are seeing multiple bidders on most of these projects. There are a couple that have only seen a single bidder at times, and oftentimes that price comes in within reason, but compared to what our estimate is. We on the HSD side of things, we have seen most projects see multiple bidders, so we're feeling like we're getting good competition on many of these projects.
Okay, good.
Last one on the list here is the Middlebury Roundabout, which is on US 7, or it's the Middlebury project, which is on US 7. This is going from, it was in scoping, so there was the work to define what the project would be. The initial estimate was at 3.5 million. As they went through the scoping process, figured out that the preferred alternative there was a roundabout. That increased the cost just due to what it costs to put in a roundabout. On the expanded projects compared to preliminary plans, again, this is $10 million or more, or 100% increase or more. We have the Bennington project, which we had talked about previously. It's, consistent scope, just increase in cost due to bidding trends. Bennington Signal 63 shows up on there for very much the same reasons. The Colchester DDI project is on here. You'll see that there's a pretty big difference between the preliminary plan phase and what is the current estimate. Much of this comes in with the modification of the design due to permitting, some of the right-of-way needs and work that was done to bring into the construction of the project. And then I also noted on here that the preliminary plans estimate was from 2014, and obviously we're in 2025 dollars, so that does play a factor in this case. Rutland Town Signal 59 is mainly due to current bidding trends, as well as the Williston Route 2 and Industrial Ave project.
Thanks. Obviously, a topic I like these intersections. So roundabouts have been increasing, and for a while it was sort of a battle of whether people like them or not. I tend to like them. I've seen them, all over the world, really, in places. And so we've been adding more and more roundabouts, and I got to assume it's because of safety. And I would guess that once it's done, even though we might look at something that says, hey, putting in the roundabout, you might have to acquire more land to do that. They take a little more space. But the infrastructure, once it's in place, I'm thinking of the one in Burlington or other places, there's no signals. There's, you know what I mean? It's just now a roundabout. Do we have data that says, hey, the safety with roundabouts increases? Certainly the crash, because of the slower speeds, people, you know, even when there are crashes, tend to be less fatal, I would assume. So is there data that says once you put the roundabout in, the long-term costs to maintain it, with, since there are no signals, is better?
I'm not aware of a dedicated report from the agency on that. There may be one, but it's kind of outside of what my shop would be doing, for lack of a better term. You know, we really rely on when we're doing a scoping study or when we're doing an analysis on which intersection control is best. You know, we are, of course, looking at what the topography is there to make sure that it can fit. We're looking at the traffic data to make sure that it's the right choice. But there are a host of crash reduction factors that can be used to say, if you have this type of intersection to start and you install a roundabout, here's what you could expect for a crash reduction based on the volumes that are out there. So there are studies on, you know, that theory behind why crashes would reduce, some items that would kind of be applied to the traffic data to say, you should expect this type of a reduction. But within my program, I haven't seen any post analysis of it.
Representative Teaser, did you?
Candace has got a.
Oh, Candace has got it. Oh, thank you. Let's see how that works.
Your email.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just had a question on the Middlebury Roundabout project. I was just hoping to get some more information exactly where that's located on Route 7. I feel like Middlebury's got some very challenging traffic areas, and would love to just have a better understanding of that.
Sure. So I can follow up with the project manager on that one, and he can fill you in with all of the details on it, if that works for you.
Sure, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Sure. All right, I'm going to jump into the final of the 10G reports in the traffic and safety program. These are the projects that have been closed out or finished. In all cases here, these are projects that have completed their work, so they're not showing funding in fiscal 26 because the work is done. And finally, we will jump to the paving program. This will be tab 5A in your white book. I apologize, you have to go backwards. Next year, hopefully I'll put these in numerical order. So we'll run through we'll run through the overview of the paving project. This is a picture of a project that was completed last year. This is the Brattleboro Newfane reclaim on Vermont Route 30. Very much the same in terms of the mission. The group's goal is to produce plan specifications and estimates for the delivery of projects. And really the focal point there is the safety, mobility, and asset condition of our roadways, typically in a longer linear stretch. As a group overview, none of the bottom information has changed. So they are looking at on time, on budget delivery of projects, quality engineering, and are the main point of contact for the public in case there are any questions. Teams made up of 6 different team members. Those are project managers and engineers and technicians. So the paving group is really looking mainly at asset conditions in trying to keep them in good shape or keep the roadways in good shape or improve the condition of roadways that have fallen into poor condition or fair condition. So the projects that are programmed within the paving design unit are based on actual data from collection that takes place either yearly or every other year, depending on the roadway. And that is identifying where those needs are for the asset itself. The overarching goal of this group, and something that you hear at many or most of the conferences that anybody goes to in the pavement design unit, is right treatment on the right asset at the right time. And that really defines how we move forward with these projects. There are things that we do involve in these projects when we're ensuring that we're placing the right treatment on the right road at the right time, that these other assets can be looked at to be pulled into the project where they will fit and where they won't change that operating mode. So we do often include guardrail replacements, either shoulder widening or shoulder rehabilitation to get a consistent shoulder. Oftentimes there's pedestrian crossings. There are always guardrail improvements, whether it's just fixing guardrail that's out there or replacing with a current standard. Most projects, I would say, we install centerline rumble stripes to improve safety. They're a low-cost safety improvement. Sometimes we have the ability to improve intersections with these projects. So it's really just making sure that we're putting the project out on time and within the cost that we've initially set.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I've talked to Jeremy about this too, but I had some questions. When, like you just said, that sometimes you can do other improvements while we're doing the pavement. And, could that include crosswalks or narrowing lanes and making a wider bike lane or something like that? Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility. It is something that we do look at on paving projects in many cases. The typical project is trying to create that consistent lane width and a consistent shoulder width. Sometimes that's transitioning down from what may have been originally said was a 12-foot lane, but may have meandered over the years to a 13-foot lane. And we're going back and defining an 11-foot travel lane and some hopefully relatively consistent shoulder width. So it is something that definitely happens with most of the paving projects is really a definition of a consistent lane width and hopefully getting a consistent shoulder. With regard to pedestrian crossings, oftentimes if we are aware of a study or aware of a need that's out there, we are installing those with the project. We are already doing pavement markings with these because we're either obliterating the pavement markings by doing the treatment or we're paving over them and need to repaint anyway. Pedestrian crossings are always something that are a viable option within these.
Yeah, there's several paving projects on state roads in Brattleboro, part of the town highway, and I have some constituents who I'm going to be in touch with the project manager about the specific questions if they wondered what other possibilities might
Sure.
exist. So it's great to hear that you can consider those.
Yep,
Great, thank you.
sure.
Representative Lau?
Yeah, I was just wondering, just to follow up on your comment, Representative Burke, is there a like a procedure that is followed, like with a town administrator or managers, where there is an opportunity to say, hey, we'd love for you guys to consider some upgrades while you're doing this? I remember in Shelburne, we got a kind of a tricky situation solved with we have a mid-block crosswalk that was not working as well as it could, and we were able to kind of get a bit of an extension out, and V-Trans was great to work with on that. And just but we're like really on top of things in Shelburne, so with that, everybody complains about Route 7 all the time. What about in like a little tiny rural village or something like that? How does that work there?
Yeah, so it's been a bit of an evolving process. The latest and greatest process right now is through new project summaries, which is something that's being created in the asset management group. Part of that new project summary is reaching out to the regional planning commissions and getting information from them. So we're using them as the conduit to hear about those needs from communities. That's one way of getting the input in. So making sure that towns are having good conversations with the regional planning commission about their needs or about studies that they may have. That's always a great place. And that's starting right at the beginning of the project. So there's plenty of time for us to vet it. I say vet it out, ensuring that we're, right treatment, right road, right time. We want to make sure that we hear that nice and early so that we can truly decide, does this fit? Can we produce the project to meet the immediate need and include this? There are also communications between the design team and the towns. Sometimes that is limited to getting dates for particular activities that are taking place that we want to plan around for our contracts. Oftentimes, and I would say most, if not all projects have a plan review that's sent out to towns and they have the ability to provide us back comments as well. So that's a little bit later in the game. But for the most part, we do have that NPS process or new project summary process that's reaching out to the RPC. So that's the best tool that I would recommend, is to keep a good conversation going with the RPCs.
Representative Couch.
Yeah, thanks. Represent Heinsberg, we've got 116 coming through, 50 miles an hour, entering the village, 50 miles an hour going out. And can you point to any projects you've done that are really just to slow the speed? Because I can go out there and, 80% of the cars are 30 miles an hour. Are there any projects that you have, or what would be the process to look at the village and speed control devices that you might have? Maybe they're flashing, telling you how fast you're going. Maybe there are curbs that sort of slow, automatically slow traffic. These sort of techniques. Are there towns where you've gone in and done those? The intersections don't need to be fixed. We've already done what we can to change the speed limits. So just, and I'm not the only town or village that finds, because there's a state road going through, that we're trying to slow the traffic. Are there any projects you can point to, or any process you can point to, that has a town come in and say, this is what we want to do? I think they're not, I'm going to say, not really expensive projects, some signage, maybe some curb, extensions, maybe a couple of other techniques.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I can relate it to the paving program for sure. There is a class 1 paving program that takes place. It's based on statute. We have to resurface all class 1 town highways on a cycle. So in a few of those cases, the town has brought to our attention the concern of traffic speeds through an area. They have some ideas that they would like to employ. It's really surrounding that traffic calming type measure, whether it's signage or bump outs for crosswalks. There have been a couple of examples where we've been able to provide some of that infrastructure with a class 1 paving project. Outside of that, I don't know, I guess, is how I would have to leave it. There is a process for VPSP2, which is a prioritization process of projects. Typically, it's a good conversation between the RPCs and putting a project forward. So I would assume that would be a great place to start.
In our case, the RPC came through 5 years ago, maybe a little more, and said, here are the traffic calming solutions, that potential solutions like you could pick from. But really nothing's happened other than the town, pushing some speed limit extensions. There's, as far as I can know, no other traffic calming opportunities.
Sure. Yeah. And it depends. I think, I don't remember for sure, but Heinsberg may be a class 1 on 116. Is that right? Or is it state highway? It is
state highway.
Yeah, state highway.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to follow up with you on that.
Okay. Yeah, I would like that, because I'd like to see, what we can do. And I asked, I think last year, that we come up with a list of sort of simple things that can be done, and depending on, the same solution's not going to work everywhere, but here's a simple list of things that can be done that do slow traffic. Rather than, we get a lot of people that say, well, the police just have to come and do enforcement. Well, that's a little bit of it, but it's really not going to work in our environment at this point. Speed bumps. Yeah. So there's probably 4 or 5 things that could be done. That we see occasionally in different places. You know, it would be great to be able to, each town sort of have a discussion and pick a couple items and move toward that.
Yeah, and some of those can be, I saw your hand, I'm sorry. Some of those can be installed through the town, going through like the 1111 permit and being able or being authorized to work within the state's right of way, which has a host of reviews that take place and make sure that, you know, we're on board with what is being put in. And that the permitting requirements are satisfied. So that's certainly one route is towns could look to the 1111 permit and look to install some of this infrastructure, depending on what it is. There would be a vetting process in place there. But that is one particular option. When it's going through on the state side or on a capital program type project, that's where I have to follow up with you.
Okay.
Representative Lally?
Yeah, I think, you know, I think this speaks to at least my hopes and expectations for the resources that we invested in the Vermont state standards, because right now, all of this you can have nice things, let's be very blunt, in your village, if you are large enough to afford class 1 highway status, which we're not in Shelburne, you're not in Heinsberg. Lots of places can't, right? And lots of places also are under tremendous fiscal constraints right now, and they're opting to, you know, they just said, well, that's not on the table right now, right? So you're extremely limited currently, let's just be perfectly blunt about it, in what you can do under an 1111 permit. So I think I am definitely hoping that the Vermont state standards will provide that list of simple things that can be done. And that we can also start to narrow the visual field in our villages, because that is how you're going to control speeds and do it affordably. You know, I've said it again. I said it before and I'll say it again. I realize that we cannot do, you know, the curb and gutter treatment that we did in Danville everywhere. We cannot afford that. And, you know, arguably it's not great for a lot of our stormwater challenges either. So we need to come up with cheaper, quicker ways to have things like enhanced shoulders that are maybe at grade with permeable paving and street trees. We have an amazing manual that was done several years ago by the Department of Forests and Parks. And I would love to see that kind of thinking sort of married with some of the Vermont state standards work that's being done. And ultimately, I would love to have a manual where it's like really clear what is allowed in the context of a downtown or a village center, a designated program location under the RPC mapping. That seems to be the most granular way to identify those places currently. And, you know, so that we can have these things. And I mean, that could be things like to deal with the 50 mile per hour on either end of the village. Maybe you have roundabouts in those two sections, and just the little in between part, you slow the traffic down. We really need to make this easier and simpler to do in communities that are looking for this.
Representative Wells?
In our town, Orleans, I lived on School Street there, and we just asked the town management to put in those temporary speed bumps. They left them in there for 8 months a year. They took them out for winter due to plowing, but they immediately slowed traffic down during that part. It was right off Route 5. And it was just a matter of asking. They were very good, because you touched on the fact that local municipalities, whether it's in your town or yours, will work with you in those cases. And that's what they did. And they still do it to this day, but they do remove them in the winter for plowing.
Yeah, and I believe Orleans is a class 1, and they have the ability to kind of take care of their maintenance.
Okay.
So, you know, that's one thing that is a maintenance, I'm going to say burden only because I can't think of another quick word. You know, it increases the maintenance level that needs to take place out there, and removing speed bumps and placing speed bumps back. And, you know, that would be a conversation that we would have to have with the maintenance team. It's not something that I'm aware of that has been put in, at least on the project level. I'm not sure. But it is, you know, it's something that the maintenance teams would have to take care of, because you're absolutely right. It's a plowing issue.
Right.
You just can't plow them.
So their towns cannot do that, cannot go to their town management and request those. Okay.
Sure how we're doing on time?
I can quickly get through the last few slides if you're.
8, 9 minutes.
Sure, I can go through quickly and tell me if you see any questions that you got. So if we're good to move on, sorry. Okay. So very quick highlight. This is the Route 30 project that I had said that we would talk about earlier on. So this is an example of looking at the project. The need out there was address the surface condition of the roadway. We had a fairly tight scope in that we needed to stay within the right of way. We needed to not increase the impervious surface. And we needed to create some type of roadway that would stand the test of time. Best choice was a full depth reclamation, which you can see kind of taking place in this process. Increases the strength of the subbase, puts on a new pavement thickness on top, designed to handle the traffic. Pretty big scope of work, but we still have those bounds of remaining within the right of way so that we don't delay that project to some point out in the future. Needed to be put out there on time. So with this type of work, we are homogenizing some of the existing pavement with some of the subbase to create a nice, stable, strong layer. We also go through with many of these projects, we go through and we place back what we title a plant mix, which is a recycled asphalt pavement. So taking some of those millings and replacing them back on the road, pave with a new hot mix, and then install guardrail. Basically what you would think of for a paving project. Get rid of the old, put something new out there. With this, and really keeping in mind right treatment, right road, right time, we also knew of a couple of different assets that could have been looked at with the project, just knowing what we were doing. So to the left here, you see that we're rebuilding a sidewalk. Mostly that was due to the actual construction taking place. We couldn't easily do the construction without impacting the sidewalk. The sidewalk fully fit within our right of way. We said, okay, remove it, do the work on the pavement, put back a brand new piece of sidewalk to replace it. The biggest addition to this, and really it was a matter of having the ability to work within an existing right of way, was there was a rock slope that was up higher on the priority list that was within the bounds of within the limits of the project. We found through some further analysis of the asset that we were able to stabilize that rock slope and, create something that was safer out there, get a little bit more room from the edge of the pavement, benefits on the snow storage, also keeps the rocks away from the road, which is of course a safety improvement. And in this case, because we were aware of that asset, we found that we had the ability to do the work with the paving project itself. And then finally, to the point about pedestrian infrastructure, we were made aware of another crossing that was needed in the area. This is down on the Brattleboro end where we added in a new crosswalk and new RFBs along with bicycle infrastructure between some points of the work.
I just want to thank you for that crosswalk. That is a place when the retreat meadows freeze over, the cars lined up all along the street and with the flashing light and the crosswalk, it's made it much safer there.
Great.
So
It's great
just
feedback.
a report from the field.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So last few slides here. Getting into the numbers. So for fiscal 26, we have an appropriation of $102.91 million, which is a decrease from last year of about $27.23 million. Much like the other programs, this will fund 3 phases of work for the projects. That's the design activities, the right-of-way activities, and the construction. I will note that right-of-way in the paving program is extremely limited. It is a very rare case that we're getting into right-of-way impacts and needing to fund that line item. But there are cases where we are doing that. What this translates to is the budget will fund construction or has funding for construction of 46 paving projects and will fund the additional work to take place on an additional 34 projects. So rather than break down the types of work on these, I broke it down to what the money is doing or how far is it going to go. What this translates to is with the funding in fiscal 26, we are anticipating 71 miles to be paved on the interstate, state, and class 1 systems, and 31 additional miles will be under that federal leveling or mill and fill type project. So in total, 102 miles. It's worth noting that because of the split of the funding year being on July 1, that really doesn't align well with the paving program. So this is really just looking at the calendar year 2025 or construction season 2025 to pull these numbers out. On to the 10G reports. These are the added projects from fiscal 25. The bulk of these projects are, actually, I think all of them are on the national highway system. These are anticipated needs to keep our national highway ratings in good shape so that we have certain thresholds that we need to meet. These are all needs to keep that threshold high enough. Most of these projects are 2-inch mill and fill type projects. So these are your, if you tell somebody it's a paving project, this is exactly what they're going to think it is. Mill some off, and then when we're going to pave back. There's one standout project in here that is the Guilford Brattleboro IM Surf Pren 86. That is a preventative maintenance type treatment. Typically, that takes the form of a very thin mill and fill. Again, as you're driving through, not knowing paving, probably is going to look like a paving project, but that one is really dedicated to the roadways in good shape. Now we're going to do something that is going to extend that condition in good shape. A little bit less invasive than a 2-inch mill and fill. 10G2 is the expanded projects from fiscal 25 of $5 million or 75%. We have 3 that show up on here. The Killington Stockbridge project is a full depth reclamation. The expansion in cost is due to plan refinement, a little additional work around. There are a couple of box culverts that are being replaced in association with this project, doing some slope repairs, improving some more drainage. So this one is getting a lot of work done to it. And it's in its final stages. So a little bit more plan refinement, and that's showing the increase, along with adjusting some of our unit bid prices to current bidding trends. The 2 Waterbury to Montpelier to Waterbury projects are out on Interstate 89. These are deep mill and fill treatments. The initial estimate was in that 10.5, 10.6, 10.7, 9, I guess is the other one. Those were the initial estimates. That's ballpark where we're going to go. That project is a deep mill and fill, so we actually dialed in the treatment a little bit more than just saying 2 down, 2 up, get out. In this case, we're doing 5 inches down, and then we'll do some grade adjustments with it. So as we define that scope in this aspect, that increase the cost of the project, but it's really trying to make sure that we're putting something out there that's going to stand the test of time. Both of those scopes are exactly the same. The only difference here is one of them is the southbound barrel, which is the first one to go, which is taking place this coming summer, is anticipated for this summer. The northbound barrel is the Pren 55 project, which is forgetting when we're showing it, not in fiscal 26.
I had a quick question on the, sorry, back up a little
Sure.
bit, back with 71 miles on the interstate. Does that mean 71 miles in each direction, or 35 north and 35 south? How does that, just curiosity, are you covering 35 miles because it's north and south, or is it 71 in both directions?
Yeah, so that figure, just a slight tweak. That figure includes interstate paving, but it's also off interstate, state highways, class 1 paving. So it's really any road that we have maintenance responsibility for. On interstate projects, it is based on the length of the barrel. So for example, the Montpelier Waterbury project, as it's separated northbound and southbound, those are each 10.5 mile projects. If we were to have that as one combined project, which I think we repaved in 2018, that project totaled up to 21 miles.
Okay.
So we do account for each barrel or centerline mileage, basically.
How many less miles are we paving this year? As opposed to, the 71 day? I was just wondering that.
I don't remember off the top of my head. I should have come with that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, if you could email us and just.
Sure.
That might just come up for discussion, what.
Sure. Yeah, I forgot to grab last year's figures for this year.
Probably on Bennington.
Oh, good. I feel there's one going to be paving north of Burlington and south of Rutland.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Where should we?
On to expanded projects as a comparison to the preliminary plans. The Killington Stockbridge project shows up on this list. I will note that the preliminary plan estimate was from 2014. There was more definition to that project that took place after preliminary plans, so there was a highlight for more drainage work, there were some more slope remediation, in there. So from 2014 to now, we have had a increase that puts it on this list. And finally is the list of projects that are no longer funded in 26. So these are the completed projects. Nothing of note here other than they are done or will be completed in fiscal 25. And that is all I have.
Anybody have any last minute questions? We're close to on time. Thank you very much for that, Matt. And for this
you.
morning session, we are adjourned. We're just in time, Patty, for break. We're back at
Never
10.
late for that.
We're back at 10:30 with Ernie for Ernie